Hi guys, it's Mack, Million within the dark room with Mack Photos. Thanks for stopping by and joining me for today, where I'm going to be explaining white balance. What's so important about white balance? Well, in addition to mastering your exposure triad, mastering white balance is going to be key. It's going to be foundation in beginning to create consistently great images. So let's hop on over to Capture One and take a look. Hi guys, thanks for joining me here over in Capture One, where today we're going to be discussing white balance. In my opinion, white balance is one of those foundational things you really must learn. It's going to be the core or foundation of setting up to create a good edit from your images. This particular image I have on the screen, we recently returned back from the Bahamas, shooting some swimwear there. I have model Chelsea Lee, has a very islandy look about her, the darker complexion of her skin, the fluorescent green bikini she's wearing. We have a white rack, which is holding the blue and yellow kayaks. Somewhat of a cloudy blue sky in the background and some green palm fronds there hanging down. So it's a really good palette of colors here for us to begin to discuss white balance. I have the controls, the white balance controls from Capture One here to the right. So I wanted to begin with discussing Kelvin. Now, when we discuss white balance, it is measured in Kelvin. For example, in this image, if we look, we can see we're at 6,203 Kelvin. White balance, if we were to break this down and make it very simple, as white balance increases. So if we were to increase the degree of Kelvin, then we notice our image starts to become kind of orangey here. We're at 14,000 Kelvin and we'll reset. We begin at 6,203. If we were to move in the opposite direction, we will begin to notice this image to become what we call cooler or bluish. Okay. So when we look at Kelvin, if you think of it in this respect, Kelvin we are familiar with as far as temperatures. If we were to decrease Kelvin, it becomes cooler. So if you think of the temperature or the weather, if we decrease Kelvin, it would become cooler or it would become cold. Same here with our color temperature. If we decrease Kelvin, it becomes cooler. If we increase Kelvin, it becomes what we call or refer to as warm. Warm is that orangey, that goldeny orange look. Another way of thinking of this is the sun. It has that amber orange color tint to it. The hotter it is, the warmer it is. As we increase Kelvin, we're warming or heating the image up. So we call it warm. Okay. All right. Beneath our Kelvin control, we have what we call tint. And tint is going to, well, the best example I'll show you here, as we increase our tint becomes red. Okay. And the opposite, if we decrease our tint, then we move to green. Okay, so if we were to look at this in regards to kind of primary colors with Kelvin, If we increase, we're going amber or orange. If we decrease, we become cooler or blue, into the blue tones here. With tint, if we increase, we go red. If we decrease, we go green. Okay? So in our white balance palette here, we have the ability to control if this image is going to be warmer, cooler, or if we're going to push red tints or green tints. Okay, so why is all of this important? To really establish a foundation for an image and moving forward with your editing, it's going to be crucial that we start out with a proper white balance to the image. Now, oftentimes you can even use the white balance palette to stylize an image, but my recommendation is for everyone to understand and be able to go in and establish a neutral white balance point. There are several tools out there. When I first began photography, I used to use a gray card, and it's an 18% gray card. You would have your subject to hold up that gray card, and you could take a tool like your dropper tool here, and let's see if we can find something that's somewhat gray in this image. We'll use the rim of her glasses there, and you could click on it. So Capture One has automatically adjusted the white balance according to a gray point that we selected in this image. Starting out, I would recommend using a gray card. Something that I would recommend even more so is the Color Checker Passport. It gives you a wider variety of gray. So definitely I would recommend checking out the Color Checker Passport. So now that we have somewhat of an understanding of Kelvin and Tint, let's go ahead and take a look at the various settings here that we have. If you look here, we have daylight, shade, tungsten, cloudy flash, white fluorescent, cool white fluorescent, daylight fluorescent, and day white fluorescent. We won't look at all of those, but we will look at some of these. These white balance options you're probably familiar with. You've seen them in your camera. You're able to go in and actually set your camera to these settings prior to shooting. So we'll take a look and gather a better understanding of how these work here. So let's go to the daylight setting. All right, I selected the daylight setting for this image, and it somewhat cooled this image down from the way that it was inherently shot. Daylight is really intended to be around 5,500 Kelvin. We'll notice that for this image it has it at 5,302. There's usually a plus or negative range around that 5,500 daylight white balance setting. But for most companies, camera manufacturers, and software and lights, you'll notice that they advertise that it is daylight balanced, usually at 5,500 or 5,600. So this setting in your camera or in your software is an automated setting to give the image a look of that daylight balance setting. Okay. The next we'll look at is shade here. Okay. You'll notice that our image got warmer, or we have more of an amber or orangish tint to the image. The reason for this is because when you're shooting in shade or underneath or you have shadows, there is a bluish tint to shadows. When I first began learning photography, one of my instructors said to me that when I see shadows, I see in blue. That didn't quite make sense to me when I was very new at photography, but as I grew and learned and practiced photography, I understood what exactly what he meant. When I see shadows, I see blue now. So if I'm looking underneath a tree in a shadow area, I see blue. The point of that is in your camera or in your software, it is going to push more of a warmer or amber into that image to offset that bluish hue that you get from shooting in shadows or in shade. I hope that makes sense. There again, if we have blue, the opposite of blue is going to be that amber. So to offset the blue that occurs in shadows or in shade, your camera or your software is going to push more amber to offset that blue. Okay, let's take a look at the next setting here, tungsten. What is tungsten? Tungsten is that amber yellowish light we see indoors. You turn a light bulb on, it's not white light, it's that yellowish, amberish colored light. That is what tungsten is. So let's click on the tungsten setting here and let's see what happens. Okay. It's turned our image blue. Okay. The same principle here. Our camera or the software is compensating for the hue or color of the tungsten lighting. So since tungsten lighting is that amber color, the camera or the software is going to push more blue into the image to offset that that amber or orangish color, and hopefully achieving more of a neutral or daylight balanced color to our image there. Okay, so tungsten would look more like this. To balance, your camera is going to push blue in hopes that we would have an image that would be more balanced, like what we see on the screen. Okay. And what would we expect to see with cloudy? Okay, thinking cloudy, overcast, a little shady, and your camera will push a little more warmth when it's cloudy. And what would we expect to see when we see flash? Okay, and to give you an idea, this image was shot with flash. So the flash setting pretty much gives us what very close to what we started out with. Although I set the white balance manually, we were at 6,203. That was my setting in camera. And the flash is at 6,312. So very close to where my manual setting was in camera. Okay, and we can go on and on through these, but really the point of this is that you begin to gather an understanding of how white balance works. Using the automatic function within camera is great. The only problem I found with that is there are inconsistencies that can occur there. It makes for some challenges when you import your images either in Lightroom or Capture One to begin to process your photos. If I have one consistent white balance, it's easy for me to make adjustments to one image and apply those adjustments across the entire images versus my white balance changing from one image to the next. Well, I hope this tutorial has been beneficial and that you've been able to add an additional tool to your arsenal of tools. And until the next time, I'll see you on the other side. Well, I truly hope this episode has been beneficial and you walk away with a better knowledge and understanding of white balance. I promise you, your mastery of white balance will pay big dividends. You'll begin to see that consistency shoot after shoot in creating great images. So until the next time, get out there, get shooting, and remember, make every shot count.